Hi there, Malcolm here for my 180th Booktube video, and today I'm bringing you my December wrap-up and January TBR. So kicking off with the numbers game, I finished 17 titles, that's totalling 4,481 pages, putting me 11,275 pages up on the end of 2022. So vastly improved effort for 2023, and only one shy from my all-time best, set back in 2017. Anyway, with 17 books to get through, that's quite a lot, so let's get cracking. First up with my book of the month, The Night House by Joe Nesbo. This is a horror, and right at the beginning, a rather unpleasant boy sees a classmate get eaten by a telephone, hence the bloody front cover. And what follows is a level of intrigue, another disappearance, bad things are happening, but no one's believing the truth. They think I did it, sort of story. However, then have a time jump a third of the way through, where they're all grown up. Nothing that happened has actually happened, and in fact the main character happens to be the author of the events that happened. Very famous novelist, very successful, and the entire town starts acting a bit peculiar. Weird stuff happens, and you think, okay, this felt like a dream from the beginning of the time jump. It feels more unreal as it goes on. None of this can possibly be real. And then we have another jump for the last part of the book, which effectively destroys any narrative or enjoyment that this book could possibly give. I'm sorry, I thought we were past the "and it was all a dream" ending of these sort of stories, but never mind. Read the first third and stop there. It's not bad at that point. The rest is just nonsensical or boring. Huge disappointment, really. Hence not bothering to do a separate video for it. After that, I then read The Naked God, or rather I finished listening to The Naked God on Audible. This is by Peter F. Hamilton, narrated by John Lee, and is the concluding portion of the story, and puts the entire trilogy up to over 120 hours of listening time. Like with book 2, this one had the advantage of everything being set up and being able to take the story forward from there. And so it hits the ground running. You know, the infection is widespread. But we now follow certain planets and peoples who have escaped reality into some other realm, and how their life continues there. And it's not quite what they'd hoped it to be. Keeping it a bit vague for spoiler reasons. And the crew of the Lady Macbeth have to go on a mission to go and find a MacGuffin to hopefully set things right. And again, keeping it vague, there was very much an IQ... Hello, cat. What do you want? You're going to come in and lick loudly, are you? What you doing? What you want? Hey, yo, what is it? You want to go out? What's that? Why are you coming to bother me? You've ignored me all day. Now what do you want? And again, keeping it vague, there was an IDDQD moment, which was either really cool or a bit of a cop-out, depending on your point of view. I thought it was cool, but I can see why people would think otherwise. Yeah, so really good trilogy overall. Very satisfying ending, I thought. I've questioned throughout whether it needed to be as long as it did. There were some character arcs that didn't really seem to do much or have much effect on anything, and could have perhaps been dropped or blended with another character. But no, I really enjoyed it. Booktastic. And after that I then read Wilt by Tom Sharp. Henry Wilt is a man trapped in a dead-end job to a rather drab woman and feels a bit put upon. And while out walking the dog, he kind of entertains the notion of murdering his wife. Now, if he were to do it, how could he physically do it? No particular intent to actually see it through, but more of a fantasy murder type thing. However, after an altercation with a sex doll at a party, he considers actually going through with his fantasy, and indeed does a practice run with said blow-up doll down a convenient building site hole, as depicted on the front cover here. Unfortunately, his wife has actually gone on a spontaneous holiday with awful friends, and people are convinced that there is a body down the hole, and he is implicated in the murder of his wife and trying to dispose her body down this hole. So full of misunderstandings and awkward situations. The highlight of this really is the interaction of Henry Wilt and the police officers as they interrogate him. He knows he's in the right, he knows he's done nothing wrong, he knows his wife will turn up at some point, or at least he hopes she does. And of course the police are convinced that he has indeed murdered her and thrown her down this hole. And of course when it turns out to be contrary to that, this was only a diversion. They're still convinced he's murdered her. Excellent back and forth. And unlike some of Tom Sharp's other writings, he actually keeps on point without too many meandering tangents. A brilliant start to the series. Buy it. This was a reread. All the key bits I did remember quite well. After that I then read a Marvel, Ms. Marvel, Fists of Justice. It's containing 3 stories featuring Ms. Marvel as she teams up with the Wolverine, Moon Knight and Venom as they do battle against a recurring enemy who's up to a thing. Yeah, really enjoyable adventure. Artwork's really good, and really explores how Ms. Marvel fits into the wider Marvel universe. Oh, bloody cat. Now what? What is it? What are you watching now? What is it? I know, I'm trying to do a thing. What do you want? What? What do you want? A moment's peace. Ha! It's ignored me all frickin' day. You know, and coming to grips with the fact that she is a superhero doing the daring deeds next to other superheroes who are more established and famous. Yeah, fun character and great story. Worth buying. And after that I then read Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Spike and Drew. Having read all of the Buffy graphic novels that we have, I managed to find this one. And this one takes place before the events of the series, throughout the ages with Spike and Drew. And it's more of a short story collection as they encounter various demons and things, as well as little bumps in their own relationship. It was alright, nothing particularly special. The artwork was a little basic, but it was okay. Worth reading. After that, I then read A Second Chance for Eden with my ears. Yes, this was another Audible by Peter F. Hamilton. Different narrator, which did kind of throw me a little bit. And this is set in the Night's Dawn trilogy universe, but leading up to the events that take place in the main trilogy. And these are completely standalone stories for the most part, and using a lot of the technologies that feature in the trilogy. I have written a more coherent write-up of every story on Goodreads and Storygraph, but with 17 books to go through, I don't really have time to go through them now. But yeah, they're generally really good. Many of them could be considered to be short stories, completely unattached to anything, just very loosely based in the Night's Dawn trilogy, and I think when they were originally written they weren't, but you know, they've been tweaked a little bit to include backdrops or technologies or people or places that do exist in the trilogy. And the final story was quite nice because it follows the Lady Macbeth and Joshua's dad, and even hints at the existence of his half-brother. I'd read it before, trying to get into Peter F. Hamilton. I thought I'd start with the short story collection, and having not read the Night's Dawn trilogy, and having re-listened to it now, having done the trilogy now, they made a lot more sense. It was nice hearing about some of the locations and characters that I knew about from the series. It's not an essential read for the trilogy. It does flesh out a bit more. There is one story, the titular story, A Second Chance at Eden, taking place on the first habitat that's made, featuring Wing-Sip Chung, the creator of Affinity and of Edenism. And that was quite a good story showing how the Edenists and the Adamists became two branches of humanity. And it's all wrapped up in a murder mystery as well. So it's a really good story, that one. Yeah, so that was worth buying. And after that, I then read Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Note from the Underground. And this, I think, is one of the last original series Buffy stories that there are before season 8 and onwards. And this is very much a wrapping up, concluding story featuring a lot of the characters from the whole series, both in graphic novel form and on screen. It's not really a finishing off, but more of a wrapping up. It was alright. Thought the story itself wasn't that interesting, to be honest. So worth reading. And then after that I then read Caliban's War, Book 2 of the Expanse series by James S.A. Corey. This was a reread. I picked it out of my jar of mystery, so I was really excited to reread this one. Featuring human-alien hybrid alien killing machines, a missing little girl, political intrigue, zombies, space battles, and coffee. And introduces two critical characters to the Expanse series, Avasavala and Bobby. Absolutely brilliant, booktastic. Can't recommend the series enough. In fact, I enjoyed this so much, I always consider just reading the rest of the series and forgetting everything else. Desperately want to read the next one. Not quite sure when I'm going to fit that in, but it's that good. After that, I then read the first of 3 point horrors, The Cemetery by D.E. Atkins. A bunch of young people go and have a Halloween celebration in a cemetery, and one of them is brutally murdered. Who done it, or what done it, and how do we stop it? It was a pretty good horror story, but like a lot of these things where there is a lot of death happening, everyone's far too cavalier about it all. And this is certainly one of the higher body counts in a point horror book I've read. You know, people are being killed and no one's taking any further precautions at all. It's extraordinary. But yeah, quite an enjoyable story. The ending was a bit woolly. I thought that was a bit silly, but it was fine. And compared to a lot of the other point horrors, really good. Worth buying. And after that I then read Marvel Venom Lethal Protector Heart of the Hunted. Venom / Eddie Brock are trying to come to terms with the fact that their wife has moved on and is now engaged to another man. Meanwhile, random people are trying to kill him. And it sort of gets in the way of things. Who's trying to kill him? Why? And at the same time, dealing with the loss of love. It's my first proper Venom story I've read. And I found it quite a complex one for what I was expecting. Really enjoyed it. The artwork is really nice. And it's really interesting seeing the reactions of people around him. As the scary looking Venom, people recoil and try to get away from him. But even as Eddie Brock, old acquaintances know who he is and again treat him like some sort of monster, even though he's not done anything at that time. He may well have a history, but he's not even allowed to be anything other than a monster. Really intriguing. Worth buying. After that, I then read the second of 3 Point Horrors, Freeze Tag by Caroline B. Cooney. And this one follows a bunch of children as they are playing freeze tag in the garden, where you play tag and you've got to stay absolutely still until you're released. Only one little girl is able to completely freeze others just by a touch. She has some sort of power. She's also not particularly nice. Quite a few years later, they're all grown up a bit more. This girl then threatens those around her with being frozen permanently unless she gets her way, and particularly Megan's boyfriend. Now, I don't think I explained it brilliantly there, but wow, this one really impressed me. I'm not a huge reader of horror. I find a lot of it quite boring or predictable. This story really unsettled me. I didn't enjoy reading it at all, and I think for that reason it did its job brilliantly. It was uncomfortable. The sense of hopelessness and the lack of any clear way out was really palpable. And as Megan and her friend's plight increased and continued, Lanny's power over everybody was so absolute that the only resolution could be as dark as the situation they were in the first place. Read some reviews and the ending did conflict people a lot, but I thought the ending was spot on in terms of how far you're willing to go and how much are you going to lose because of somebody else. There's more going on than that as well, but I'm trying to keep it vague for spoiler reasons. But no, absolutely booktastic. I think it's the first booktastic of the Point Horrors for me. And I was really impressed with this one. And after that, I then read The Fever by Diane Ho. Now, I've had a bit mixed results with Diane Ho, so I came with this one with a little bit of interpretation, particularly having just read the fantastic Freeze Tag. The Fever takes place in a hospital with Duffy, who's got a fever and drugged up to the eyeballs. And while in this state, she hears something she's not entirely pleased about, but she doesn't know what it is. I mean, she's not really with it in the first place. And over the coming days, certain things happen that nearly kill her. And comes to a point where it's not accidental. There is definitely somebody trying to kill her. But because everyone thinks she's delirious, everyone thinks she's not making it up, but not really knowing what reality is because she's so ill and drugged up. And again, another sense of hopelessness, of being in a position of you can't really do anything to save you, and everyone thinks they're doing the best for you, even if it is killing you even further. Literally, she finds out the medication she's been given is poisoning her, and of course, and even telling people this is poisoning her. No, it's only the delirium talking. So really good. And the big reveal at the end, I thought was pretty good actually. I hadn't guessed it, and I don't think it was that far-fetched either. In theory, the clues are there, but I just enjoyed the ride, as it were. Again, I felt uncomfortable, so it did the job well. Booktastic again. So 2 booktastics in a row with Point Horror. Who'd have thought it? Yay. And then after that, I then read Marvel Spider-Punk Battle of the Band. Now, I nearly didn't pick this one up, but I looked at it and thought, I don't really fancy that. I flicked through it and thought the artwork looked a bit grainy, looked a bit gritty. I thought, I'm not really going to want that one. Anyway, I caved and got it, obviously. And I'm really glad I did. This is set in a different Spider-Verse to the ones that have already been established. And here, Spider-Punk and his mates have overthrown the authority. It's malevolent authority at that. And I get the impression that we're in some sort of post-apocalyptic type setting. It's never really made that clear. But some stuff goes down and the Spider Band need to go and save the day and find out just what is going on so they can save the day. I found the interaction of the characters to be brilliant. I found the alternate versions of the characters to be very clever. And even though there is a Hulk, he's not overused. The humour here is witty and quick. And I think my only critique was its attempt to be really edgy was a little blatant at times. It's like, okay, I get it, you're edgy, you're being edgy. But other than that, really fun story, really enjoyed the characters, booktastic, really glad I picked it up. And after that I then read Buffy the Vampire Slayer Pale Reflections. This being the last of the graphic novels that we hadn't picked up, and then I picked it up. And again, everything before season 8. This one takes place somewhere in the middle of the series and follows straight on with events that happened in the previous book. And because I hadn't really read them in that order, and it'd been a while since I had read the book that this precludes, I did complain at the time, so this obviously goes somewhere, I don't know where. I finally got this one, so I was really happy about that. There's a cloned Buffy being grown by a vampire, and she's off to kill Buffy and sabotage everything that she stands for. And it plays out in a slightly different way than what you expect from that premise, which really impressed me as well. And it was closure. Now, one recurring baddie finally gets their comeuppance, and a lot of the open-ended things from the book that I'd read previous to this one got closed, which was really good. No fault of the series, I didn't have access to read this book before, but really glad I finally did. Wish I'd read it in the order that I was supposed to have done. Yeah, worth buying, if you can find it. And after that, I then read Calvin and Hobbes. Now, I've got all the Calvin and Hobbes books. I've read them so many times I can't count, but they're falling apart. And so although I am going to count reading them in the original book forms that I did, I've now got the complete Calvin and Hobbes box set with everything Calvin and Hobbes related in these 4 fine volumes. So I'm going to read them in here, but I'm going to count them as the individual books that I originally read them as. I'll put that down because it's bloody heavy. Yeah, so Calvin and Hobbes, the opening book. Well, for those who don't know, Calvin and Hobbes is a comic strip that featured in a newspaper somewhere, I don't know, in America, and features a 6-year-old boy by the name of Calvin and his stuffed cuddly tiger named Hobbes, who, to Calvin's overactive imagination, is very much alive and real. And Calvin and those around him are very much a victim to his imagination, as he finds himself as Spaceman Spiff on alien planets, going back in time to see dinosaurs, fighting his oatmeal across the kitchen table, or otherwise not seeing reality in the same way that anybody else does. And as a series of comic strips, there's no real storyline or plot or ongoing sequence of events. Occasionally there may be a 1 or 2 strip story, or 4 or 5, but each strip is individual, independent to any of the others for the most part, and the same can be said for all the books really. But for the first one, there are things to point out. Firstly are the illustrations themselves, which, as one would expect from the earliest Calvin and Hobbes strips, the artwork is a little bit basic compared to the later editions. The formation of the characters is still a little rough around the edges, but that just adds to the appeal of reading the first series. What also impressed me was the fact that I think all the recurring characters are introduced in this book, from Mum and Dad, obviously, to Miss Wormwood the teacher, Susie Durkins, who recently joins the school, as well as Rosalind the babysitter. An absolute joy to reread, and an absolute joy to read for the first time. I remember the first time, it was really good. Can't recommend this series enough. Calvin and Hobbes, booktastic. And after that, I then read Watchers of the Dark. This is book 2 of the Jan Darzek series by Lloyd Biggle Jr. and my most favourite book of all time. Absolutely love this one. I'm not quite sure why I'm so enamoured with it. I mean, it is good, I'm not saying it's not, but it's always my go-to. It's like, what's your favourite book? This is it. Jan Darzek is a private investigator of planet Earth, and he is hired by an alien civilization to investigate the Dark. The Dark being a series of planets who are spontaneously throwing off all non-native peoples and dropping off grid, really. What's causing it? Why is it happening? Why is it spreading? And how do we stop it? Now, obviously this is a reread, but it's the first time I've read this after having read book 1, All the Colours of Darkness, which in a lot of ways is a completely different book and completely different story, but there's a couple of crucial things that happen in that one which explains the ending of this one, so that was really satisfying. Yeah, still absolutely love it. I love the imagination behind it, I love the characters, the creatures, the beings. Yeah, absolutely booktastic. And after that I then read Something Under the Bed is Drooling. Literally got to 31st of December, thought, well, what can I read that's quite quick? So this is the second book of the Calvin and Hobbes series, and it does play a little bit more about Calvin's fear of monsters living under the bed. I also mentioned that each book does cover a period of about a year and a half or so. Now, Christmas is a big time. Again, lots of fantastic, hilarious, thought-provoking moments. And this one features a series of strips surrounding an injured raccoon that Calvin finds, which leads to some very deep thoughts on life and death. Actually quite a poignant strip, that one. And absolutely booktastic. So, that was my books read. Now on to my books I'm planning on reading. Well, I've only got 15 minutes, so I'm not going to muck about. Let's get on with it. First up is George Barry, Lost in Berhampton by Jesse Barrett. Jesse found me on Goodreads. I just put up the fact that I read Wilt. Said, oh, if you like Wilt, you might like this one. Would you mind reading it? I said, sure. So he sent me a copy, signed, turned up within a couple of days, so really impressed, particularly around the Christmas period. And George is a retired man living in Berhampton, and he's appalled by a group of right-wing bigots who want to oust the proprietors of the local tandoori. And so George takes matters into his own hands. He goes online and orders a Zorro costume, and thus masked and caped, it goes off to right wrongs as a superhero called Fairness Man, and things generally go wrong. So I have read it. I'll do a separate video and write-up review of it once I've thought about it a bit more. But after I've finished reading this one, which I've already done, I'll then moved on to Mistress of the Empire by Raymond E. Weiss and Janny Wirt. This is book 3 of this trilogy in the Rift War series, following Myra head of the Akoma, as she continues to fight against the other houses, and this time it looks like the old ones, the Assembly of Magicians, have taken a thing against her. It's a hefty tome of 800 plus pages. Now I'm slowly working my way through it, but full of politicking, honour, assassins, mystery, murder, mayhem. Really enjoyed the first 2 books, hoping to enjoy this one. And after that, once I do eventually get through that one, I'll then move on to the slightly thinner Winter in Eden, the second book of the West of Eden trilogy by Harry Harrison. West of Eden asks what would happen on planet Earth had the dinosaurs not died out, and the answer was a civilization of Yeleni, or lizard people, who encounter a bunch of humans who have just pretty much come down from the mountains. Events took place in that one, lots of fighting, lots of death, lots of chaos. Winter is not just coming, it is here. This is a reread, but I have very little recollections to what happens in this one, apart from it might be a bit chilly. Looking forward to rereading it. I know it's good. After that, I'll then move on to A Stroke of the Pen by Terry Pratchett, a bunch of lost stories that have been collected after his death, with a foreword by Neil Gaiman. This is the Waterstones exclusive edition with extra doodles. From what I understand in this one, Terry Pratchett in his younger days did write a whole bunch of stories for some magazines and newspapers under a pseudonym, and after he died and everything else he did was published, somebody recognised his writing style in one of these stories and realised that there were a whole bunch of Terry Pratchett stories written under this different name that were in fact his, and I think this is a collection of that. So looking forward to reading them. And once I've done that, I'll then move on to Soul Music by Terry Pratchett, part of the Discworld series, and in fact the 16th book of the Discworld series, or the 3rd Death book. You don't actually have to read the Discworld books in order, I like to. And in this one, a young lad named Imp E. Kellen finds a magical instrument, which he calls the guitar, and forms a group of musicians that play music with rocks in. And of course, being the Discworld, this effect has unexpected consequences because this music happens to be alive. Full of hilarious things, deep thought-provoking things, and fundamental human things. Looking forward to rereading this one. Wondering if I'm going to fit it in January. I need to step up my reading of it. So that's my normal reading. Obviously I'm going to continue with the Calvin and Hobbes, so the next couple will be You Can Ho and Weirdos from Another Planet. I've also picked up this month's Marvel Select, What If Miles Morales. Absolutely love the What If series on Disney Plus. If you haven't seen it, go and watch it. But this is What If Miles Morales. Looks like he's Thor, Hulk, Captain America, and Wolverine. So presumably this is a series of short stories. I don't know. Looking forward to finding out. What if? Yay! And to my wife, I'm still reading A Curse of Krakens by Kevin Hahn, the 3rd book of the Seven Kennings trilogy. Really good so far. I've already spoken about that one, and I'm running out of time massively. And battery power by the looks of things. Blimey. Gotta wrap this up quick. So wrapping up. So I hope you enjoyed that. Anything there that you were interested in, then do comment down below. Anything you didn't like, comment down below. But be nice. Yes, definitely be nice. How's your reading in December? How was your reading in 2023? I'm planning on doing a best 10 and worst 10 reads of the year. So look out for those. But otherwise, have a good 2024 and see you later.